Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we are ranking the 10 most important people in the galaxy as we prepare to move into 10th edition. General spoiler warning to begin, as today we will be referencing events from across the Warhammer 40k universe. So you have been warned. And with that said, let's just jump straight in. So the next edition of 40k is upon the horizon, and we're about to reach the climactic end of the Arcs of Omen campaign. We already know we're about to get a major shake-up with the incoming return of Lion L. Johnson. The Tyranids are about to arrive in force, and one way or another, Chaos and Abaddon are probably about to become more ascendant than ever. So with all that in mind, just who are the most important people out there? Who on a galactic level of importance could have a role to play in shaping the galaxy's direction? Who from a narrative standpoint are the major players? Well, that's what we're going to debate now. Before we begin, as usual, this is just my opinion. There are no right or wrong answers when talking lore, just the fun of the conversation. So agree, disagree, drop your own rankings and thoughts in the comments below. I'm also talking more mortal characters today, so no Gods of Chaos or the immortal God Emperor. Also, important doesn't necessarily mean strongest. There are many characters out there with huge influence or importance, but that doesn't mean they can beat Angron one-on-one, for example. If we were talking simply strength, we know it would be dominated by the Primarchs. And in just the top 10, there are obviously some harsh decisions that have had to be made. This list has changed about a dozen times, and I'll probably have changed my mind again after recording this audio. But without further ado, kicking it off in 10th place, I have the Warden of Imperium Nihilus, Dante. As most people are aware by now, in the aftermath of the devastation of Baal, Dante was given the title of Warden of Imperium Nihilus by the Lord Commander himself, Rabute Guilliman, effectively placing him in command and responsible for half the galaxy. All of the Imperium Nihilus is Commander Dante's responsibility. On the face of that alone, surely Dante should be far higher in this ranking. A man with half the might of the Imperium at his disposal. And well, if that were literally the case, he would be. However, the simple fact is, the Imperium doesn't really exist anymore beyond the Rift. Far from commanding the might of the Imperium, Dante's having to cobble together his own fleet from any salvageable or lost ship he can find. Dante's forces and fleets aren't growing to fresh recruits and supplies from the Imperium's vast supply routes. They're growing whenever a refugee ship can find the Blood Angels home, or when the Angels can save a world that somehow survived the darkness. The state of Imperium Nihilus cannot be overstated. The novel Spear of the Emperor gives you a great bit of insight into how bad things really are, how the systems and worlds out there are only left to wonder if the Imperium still exists at all, or if indeed they are all alone. And the novel Darkness in the Blood is the latest glimpse of Dante's efforts to fight back the darkness, showing just what an uphill battle his truly is. And none of that is taking into account the further devastation currently being inflicted by the Arcs of Omen campaign, the huge portion of Imperium Nihilus fallen to Khorne's rage. But with all that said, with all Imperium Nihilus's problems, the position of Warden remains a vital one, even if only figuratively for now. It represents the hope for the future, a rallying point against the dark, a promise of intent that Imperium Nihilus has not been forgotten. In an ideal world, Dante would and should be higher in this ranking. Perhaps with Guilliman's upcoming invasion of Imperium Nihilus, we'll be able to see Dante's burden lifted. However, at this time, it simply can't be. In fact, it's a testament to Dante's reputation and ability he's even on this list at all. Such are the challenges he faces. Moving on to number 9, Trajan Valoris. Trajan Valoris is the Captain General of the Custodes, and admittedly having him on this list may be a surprise to some people. However, when I sat down to really focus on just who the most important names out there are, I found myself time and again feeling that Valoris should absolutely be on this list. Firstly, this guy is the master of the 10,000. Quite possibly, and most likely, the greatest fighting force in the entire galaxy. Each custodian is a work of art, a level of dedication and effort that goes beyond anything else. One custodian alone can defeat virtually anything save a Primarch. 10,000 of them. 10,000. That is a force to be reckoned with. Alongside that, they have their fellow Talons of the Emperor, the Anathema Psychana, the Sisters of Silence, and every aspect of their war gear, from personal blades to fleet-bearing warships, are simply a cut above anything else. From a simple power perspective, Valoris stands virtually unrivaled beneath the Lord Commander. But that in fact is perhaps the lesser of the reasons he's on this list for me. Far more important is what he represents: the throne. The Emperor's Custodes are the throne. They are the very symbol of the Emperor, the voice and the action. They are a part and above everything and everyone within the Imperium, including the Lord Commander, Rabute Guilliman. They answer only to the Emperor of Mankind. That makes Valoris incredibly important. When Guilliman reunited with his father, he was permitted to do so by Valoris. When Guilliman entered the throne room, he did not do so alone, for Trajan Valoris was by his side. And it was Trajan Valoris who assigned Tribune Colquhoun to accompany the Lord Commander on his travels across the galaxy. A notoriously distrustful custodian of the returned Primarch and his brother's legacies. Colquhoun and his custodians accompany Guilliman to protect him, to represent the Emperor's power with him. However, by far and away most importantly, to watch him. Don't get me wrong here, Valoris does trust Guilliman. He probably even likes him, but his duty to the Emperor is more important than anything else. And history has shown the Primarchs to be fallible. Valoris knows the history of the Imperium. He knows the Emperor's dream failed because of the Primarch's betrayal. Guilliman has, and most likely always will be, loyal, but Valoris cannot take any chances. He has to be ready to act at the merest hint of Guilliman falling to chaos. Now the dynamic is about to change somewhat with Lion L. Johnson's return. But him aside, if there was any warriors capable of taking out a Primarch quickly and efficiently, should the worst come to the worst, it would absolutely be the Custodes. One-on-one, of course not, but it'd take far less of them than Astartes for sure. And they are likely the only institution capable of removing a Primarch, let alone a Lord Commander, without huge political and civil uproar. Because again, they are the Emperor's words and actions. If the Custodes do it, it's because he wills it. And even with all of that, we haven't even spoken of him being a High Lord of Terror, and immersed within the nature of the throne world. Honestly, there are few, if any, who could guide the Imperium's hand, such as Valoris. If he so chose, of course. So, as the commander of the Emperor's Talons, the most elite fighting force the Imperium has, representing and being answerable only to the Emperor of Mankind, above even that of the Lord Commander, a permanent voice on the High Lords of Terror, and the only man capable of ordering Guilliman to be taken out without huge repercussions, Trajan Valoris is absolutely a hugely important figure to the Imperium's fate. Let the galaxy be thankful he doesn't share Colquhoun's temperament. Next, in number 8, I have Yvraine, the Herald of Iniad. Now, Yvraine has been a bit of a mixed bag since her entry into the lore. The arrival of the Inari felt like a seismic shock in the future of the galaxy, let alone the Eldari race. And it undoubtedly was that. However, since then, admittedly, it's felt like it's hit a bit of a standstill. And maybe as a result of that, Yvraine gets largely overlooked and forgotten about. I know what you're thinking. The Eldari are a dying race, going from one desperate tragedy to another. The additional divergences and disagreements the Inari have brought about have hardly have helped the issue, and I wouldn't disagree with any of that. But there's one simple reason Yvraine belongs on this list, and that's because she has just one Crone Sword to go before she can kill Slaanesh. Yvraine's quest since her ascension to Iniad's Herald has been to claim the 5 fabled Crone Swords of Morai Heg. With the combined power of the 5, she will be able to bring about the true birth and awakening of the God of the Dead, Iniad, without the need for the sacrifice of her race. Iniad's arrival has long prophesied the death of Slaanesh, and Yvraine is on the cusp of that victory. She even knows where it's located, within the infamous Palace of Slaanesh. It may seem a mission impossible for the Eldari to enter the home of their most hated enemy and escape alive. But they have successfully entered and escaped the Garden of Nurgle before, so can we truly say it's impossible? With being just one Crone Sword away from killing a god of chaos, birthing their own to enter into the god war within the Immaterium, Yvraine absolutely deserves her place on this list. She is one of the few figures amongst the galaxy who can truly alter its fate. Moving on to number 7, I have Magnus the Red. Magnus is another character who's largely been in the background as of late, but this is more of course him simply having had his turn and the spotlight moving on to his traitor brothers, Mortarion and then more recently Angron. Magnus's time to return to the narrative will come about again sooner rather than later, and when he does so, he will surely be the threat he should be seen as. Magnus, despite me being a Space Wolf fan, has long been one of my favourite characters. The thoughtful, articulate, caring and yes arrogant man we saw within the Crusade, and the tragic fall from grace thereafter. Truly one of the best personal journeys of the heresy. The 40k era Magnus has suffered a little at times with the classical villain stereotype. However, it serves as a good contrast to the man we once knew. And thanks to Guilliman's return, it has allowed the traitor Primarchs to be elevated in prowess somewhat. For example, Mortarion defeated Guilliman with ease. So I expect when Magnus eventually returns to a major storyline, he'll be back to a truly galactic threat proportions. So I admit, this ranking is more on what Magnus is and should be, rather than what we have perhaps seen thus far, with him largely having been focused on the Wolves and Prospero. But let's make no mistake, Emperor of Mankind aside, Magnus is the most powerful Psyker in the galaxy. It's not even close. No one can rival Magnus. And I'm going to reference something from the Siege of Terra here, so spoiler warning for the next 30 seconds or so. But Vulcan had to enter the webway and take out his brother during the siege, because otherwise Magnus single-handedly could have cost the Emperor the war. And it required an effort and sacrifice from Vulcan that only he could have fulfilled. The fact that Magnus has been focused on Fenris and bringing the planet of the sorcerers into the material universe is actually a blessing for the Imperium, because he has the mind and power to be a threat beyond imagination. And now he's accomplished those things, the Imperium should be very, very afraid. Magnus doesn't have the might of the Death Guard, or the Black Legion for example. However, quite simply, he doesn't need it. He himself is the danger. It's really no wonder anytime Guilliman witnesses something he can't explain, such as the Saint saving him on the world of Parmenio, one of the first words out of his mouth is Magnus, because he knows how powerful and dangerous his brother's schemes can be. Magnus may not have done much lately to award this position on this list, but the simple fact that he exists, that he's out there somewhere, means he is absolutely one of the most important people in the galaxy. And for me, he absolutely has to be on this list. Next, we have the Fabricator General of Mars. You know, given the absolute dependency of the Imperium on the Mechanicum, and how the Mechanicum, while a part of the Imperium, is essentially its own power, it's a crying shame we don't see more of the Fabricator General in the narrative, because they are a hugely important role. Now, you'll note I'm referring to the title rather than the current occupant, who is Fabricator General Raskian, because his current fate is somewhat a little up in the air, as of the Vaults of Terror series. But the Fabricator General is a hugely important figure in the Imperium's survival. They have authority over the entire Mechanicum. If they wanted to cause problems for the Imperium, if they felt in some way the Imperium was betraying the Mechanicum, it would be a monumental problem. They alone could literally bring the Imperium to a standstill. And perhaps a strife of sorts is not so far-fetched, because we know a certain Belisarius Cawl is seeking that position. Now, Belisarius may publicly claim otherwise, but the truth is we have seen his repeated private appeals to Guilliman to instill him as the new Fabricator General. And given Raskian's current ambiguous fate, it could well happen. Guilliman has been reluctant due to the clear ambition of Kull, harbouring no small amount of private concern. He is also aware he has no right to name his own fabricator general, and that if he even attempted it, it could well erupt in civil war, or even if Kull attempted to seize it for himself. So whether it's still Raskian, or another occupant who still wields the title of Fabricator General, it's clear this position is only going to become more important in the months and years ahead. The very stability of the Imperium could depend on the Fabricator General's actions. Moving on, in 5th place, I have Lion L. Johnson. Yes, I'm surprised to have the Lion so low on the list as well. If there's one thing for certain, the return of another Primarch is one of the most important events in the galaxy's history. The Lion could be about to change the Imperium as we know it, making him surely the most important person out there. However, in going by the very limited information we know, I'm not sure how much L. Johnson is going to rock the boat. In fact, it feels like to me, he's going to get straight down to work, cleansing the enemy from Imperium Nihilus. Now, of course, that still makes him a hugely important character in the grand scheme of the galaxy, but not necessarily top of the pile for me. Again, I'm trying to rank in importance rather than just simple combat prowess, and I can't stress enough just how little we actually know about the Lion's return right now. However, it certainly feels like Guilliman is still going to be in charge, and the Lion is going to be focused on getting down to business. I don't expect their reunion to be all sunshine and rainbows, assuming L. Johnson's character remains largely the same, but I think it's clear it'll go better than not. And so until we get to see it for our own eyes, the Lion has to land in 5th for me. Now, in breaking into the top 4, I have Belisarius Kull. Belisarius has been, and will continue to be, a hugely influential character. This man's creations are arguably more the reason for the Imperium's salvation than the returned Guilliman himself. Through his 10,000-year labour, Kull perfected upon the Emperor's own work, and now he has turned his attention to the Necron's ancient Blackstone technology, determined to rid the galaxy of the threat of the Great Rift. If there is any man capable of achieving such a feat, then surely it has to be Belisarius Kull. And as we move into 10th edition, we are surely going to see further development of his progress. Should Kull succeed, he will quite literally have saved the galaxy. Forget the Emperor protects, it'll be Belisarius protects. Now, that heresy aside, of course those accomplishments and ambitions of Kull's are honourable and without doubt. However, he is not without his own fair share of shades of grey. He is highly believed to have worked within the forbidden area of artificial intelligence, making him a hugely divisive figure within the Mechanicum. As we discussed earlier, despite his public claims otherwise, he does appear to be privately seeking the Fabricator General position, which, if accomplished, could tear the Mechanicum into civil war. And it appears highly likely he has experimented with traitor Primarch Geneseed, despite having been expressly forbidden to do so by Rabute Guilliman, so it's clear Khal is a man who will cross lines, disregard rules whenever he chooses. And with him now experimenting with Necron technology, seeking the position of Fabricator General, he remains absolutely one of the most important beings in the galaxy. There can be no doubt about that. Into the top 3, and I have the Silent King. Sarek announced his return to the galaxy with a bang, a literal figure of legend, once more bestriding the stars. The narrative may have moved on from the Necrons for now, on to Chaos and next the Tyranids, but the Silent King remains one of the most powerful, influential figures in the galaxy. He has now largely reasserted his control over all of the Necron dynasties. A few standout holdouts such as Imhotep remaining. As such, with the dynasties now unified beneath his command, the full force of the Necrons can be brought to bear. And that is a frightening force indeed. With every day that passes, with every tomb that awakens, the Necron power is only growing. The Imperium may have Belisarius experimenting with Necron Blackstone, but compared to the Necrons themselves, he is less than a child. They don't need to experiment, they already master it. And as such, Sarek already has nexuses across the galaxy, pushing back the tides of the warp. The Tyranids are now entering the galaxy in force, the races of the living unified in their terror. For the immortal Necrons, their Silent King returned specifically to face this threat. And if you think he isn't prepared on how to deal with them, well then you don't know Sarek. The Necrons are a race millions of years old. Millions. They sailed the stars before life on Terra had even evolved. They bargained with gods, and they broke them. Their Silent King can orchestrate 1,000 campaigns across the galaxy in an instant. He alone is a strategic genius that even Guilliman would struggle to match. And he sails the stars on a personal barge that blocks out the very stars. The narrative may have moved on from the Necrons. However, the Silent King remains one of the most important figures in the galaxy's fate. Quite simply, there are few, if any, who can rival him. Finally now, the top 2. And I think most of us would probably have boiled it down to these 2 people. In second place for me, I have Abaddon the Despoiler, the unopposed War Master of Chaos. Now, Abaddon alone has achieved what others could not. He has broken the chains of the Eye of Terror and cleaved the galaxy asunder. Abaddon alone has secured the favour of the dark gods of Chaos, and he alone has unified each of their foul followers. Like him or not, Abaddon is the man. Whatever transpires at the end of the Arcs of Omen campaign, it's a given, Abaddon will be more powerful than ever, and the Imperium will continue to feel his wrath. What can you say about this guy that hasn't been said already? Quite simply, he's winning the war. Is he a match for the traitor Primarchs one-on-one? No, but he doesn't need to be. He went above them, to the bosses, to the ruinous powers, and they flock their followers to his banners, desperate to secure his allegiance, to gain this champion over their brothers. And it is Abaddon who refuses to bend his knee. Guilliman may have the advantage over Abaddon on the battlefield, even the wider campaign. However, Guilliman fundamentally wasn't made to understand chaos. And as such, Abaddon will always have that trump card in his belt. That wild factor unknown. Regardless of how the incoming Hive fleets change the picture, Abaddon is, and will remain, one of, if not the, most important character in the galaxy. Quite simply, there is no other way to view it. But so finally, at the very top, the numero uno, of course it has to be Roboute Guilliman, the Imperial Regent, the Lord Commander. The man who has had the weight of the galaxy's survival on his shoulders since the moment he returned. Regardless of the fact he's about to be joined by another brother, Guilliman will remain the most important character in all of the lore. It seems certain he is to remain in charge, and thus command the full might of the Imperium. He has had to contend with his father becoming a god, the rise of faith, and the explosion of psychic power across the Imperium. And still he somehow manages to hold it all together. Guilliman may not be his brother's equal in combat, and you could argue who is the better commanding a battlefield, but building an empire, governing the Imperium on a galaxy level, marshalling its defences and all the administration in between, well, quite simply, Guilliman has no equal. He is the man who will continue to shape and guide the Imperium's fate, and regardless of any tension amongst him and his brother L. Johnson, having another loyal Primarch back is nothing short of a huge boost, mentally and physically. With Starchild theories, the Emperor's ascension and the element of faith all seeming to play a big role in things to come, Guilliman is going to be integral in every event we see. He has been since his return, and he will be moving forward. Roboute Guilliman is, and will remain, the most important figure in the galaxy. But as always everyone, what do you think? What are your personal rankings when it comes to the most important people in the galaxy? For me, this was surprisingly tough, getting it down to just 10. There were of course a few notable exceptions I've had to leave out. Eldrad Ulfran, for example, is always tied up within galactic-wide events. Though he personally doesn't command a great deal of forces, his ability with prophecy is of course unrivaled within the current galaxy. Ghazghkull Thraka is the prophet of the War, the one destined to unify all of the greenskin race. However, at the moment I just had to have him missing the cut, because the Orcs remain too divided. In a few years' time, he could well be top of the list. And of course, there are many other characters out there who are hugely important. But again, agree, disagree, drop your own thoughts in the comments below. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.